We all want to be happy, right? It feels like it's our most basic, fundamental drive. But what if I told you our brains, they weren't actually designed for it? It's a pretty wild thought, but it turns out there's a lot of science to back it up. So the big question is, why is that? And more importantly, what can we actually do about it? Let's get into it. Okay, so have you ever had one of those days where you try to force yourself to be happy? You're like, come on, cheer up, and you only end up feeling worse? It's this super weird, frustrating feeling that, believe me, most of us have had. And it turns out it's not just you. It's a real psychological thing. It's actually called the happiness paradox. Yeah, that's right. Research shows that the very act of trying to be happy can be mentally exhausting. It drains our willpower, and ironically, it makes us more likely to do things that actually make us unhappy. It's like the author Mark Manson said, the desire for more positive experience is itself a negative experience. Kind of messes with your head, right? So to really get our heads around this, we're going to break it all down. First things first, let's talk about the big myth that really fuels this whole paradox in the first place. See, at the core of all this is this powerful, unspoken belief that happiness should be our default setting. We just kind of assume that if we're not happy, something's wrong with us, something's broken. But that very idea, it sets us up for failure. So if we're not naturally built for happiness, what is our default mode? To answer that question, we need to take a look under the hood at our evolutionary programming. I mean, what is our brain really designed for? And here it is. This slide lays out the fundamental issue perfectly. Our brains, which have been shaped by millions of years of evolution, they have one primary goal: survival, not happiness. Natural selection couldn't care less about our feelings. It just cares about keeping us alive long enough to pass on our genes. And this survival first mindset, well, it comes with some pretty interesting and often frustrating little features. First up, we've got something called the negativity bias. Just picture our ancestors out on the savannah, right? There are 100 delicious, tasty berries around, but there's also one tiger hiding in the bushes. What's more important to pay attention to? The tiger, obviously. Our brains evolved to be these incredible threat detection machines, constantly scanning for and focusing on the negative. It's what kept us alive. I love this quote from neuropsychologist Rick Hansen. He says, our brains are like Velcro for bad experiences and Teflon for good ones. It's just perfect. It was an incredibly useful survival tool back in the day, but in our modern world, it often just leads to a lot of anxiety and a pretty skewed view of reality. And that brings us to another one of our brain's little quirks, something Yale professor Laurie Santos calls miswanting. This is huge. We are absolutely convinced that certain things, more money, a better job, the perfect relationship, are going to be the ticket to happiness. But study after study shows that once our basic needs are met, those things have a surprisingly small and short-lived impact on how we feel. We're just, we're fundamentally bad at predicting what will actually bring us joy. So what gives? Even when we achieve those big goals, why is the happiness so fleeting? Why does it just seem to fade away? Well, that brings us to the fading feeling. The reason for this is something called hedonic adaptation. You might have heard it called the hedonic treadmill. Basically, our brains are absolute masters of getting used to things. That brand new car, that big promotion, that amazing trip, yeah, they give us a short-term high, but they very quickly just become our new normal, our new baseline. We're always running, but our overall level of happiness kind of stays in the same place. This slide here just captures that gap between our expectations and the reality so well. We imagine a huge achievement, like getting a promotion, is going to bring us this lasting, years-long happiness. But think about it from an evolutionary point of view. That would be a disaster. If our ancestors felt permanently satisfied after one good hunt, they probably wouldn't have survived. It's that little nagging feeling of discontent that keeps us striving. And this quote from a cognitive biologist really is a powerful summary of our whole situation. Evolution dangles this phantasm of happiness in front of us, not as a real destination, but as a motivator, a trick, really, to keep us moving, surviving, and achieving. Okay, I know this might all sound a bit discouraging, but here's the good news. Once we understand how our brain is programmed, we can start to work with it instead of constantly fighting against it. So it's time to build a new toolkit for our well-being. Let's be real, we're not going to change millions of years of evolution. Our survival instincts are hardwired in there. But what we can do is consciously build new habits, what Laurie Santos calls rewirements, that can actually counteract our natural tendencies and actively, cultivate a sense of well-being. And the cool thing is, the research is super consistent on what works. It points to a few really powerful habits you can see right here. First, building real, genuine social connections. Second, being other oriented, which just means doing nice things for other people. Third, practicing gratitude to actively push back against that negativity bias. And finally, just moving our bodies. Even 20 minutes a day can make a huge difference. So, with these new tools in our back pocket, we can now start to reframe our ultimate goal. We can start to look beyond just happiness. And a really crucial shift in perspective is how we look at negative emotions. Instead of seeing sadness or anxiety or frustration as some kind of personal failure, we can start to see them as data. They're just signals from our brain telling us that, hey, something in our life needs our attention or maybe needs to change. This quote really highlights the incredible power of acceptance. When we fight against negative feelings, we actually give them more power over us. But when we can just accept them without judging ourselves, we can take away their sting. It's a paradox, but accepting a negative experience can be a profoundly positive act. So if the constant, endless chase for happiness is flawed, what's the alternative? Well, one really powerful idea is something called equanimity. It's a concept from Buddhist philosophy that basically describes a state of mental balance. It's not about being happy all the time. It's about being able to experience both the good and the bad without getting totally overwhelmed by either. And that brings us to a final, really powerful question to think about. What if the problem isn't that we can't be happy, but that we're just chasing the wrong thing? What if instead of asking, how can I be happy, we started asking, how can I live a life of meaning and balance? The answers to those questions, well, they might just lead us to a place that's far more fulfilling than a fleeting state of happiness ever could be.